Namaskar, I'm Ashok Vyas, and in this show we talk about everything that relates to us. And there are certain issues where we are deriving the sense of meaning of life. Sometimes the same M from meaning becomes misery, and there are relationships when they take a detour rather than thriving on harmony. There is discontentment, disgruntlement, and the one word which though begins with the first alphabet A, that is abusive. And when a relationship turns abusive, what happens? We will try to understand how to navigate abusive relationship with the help of someone who has counseled many people as life coach and coach for mental well-being. Let me have the pleasure of welcoming Dr. Nitin Saraswat ji. Namaste. Welcome.
Say thank you, sir. Thank you for having me on board.
So, Nitin ji, before we get into the other side of the coin, which, as I mentioned, abusive and it is a buzzword these days. Let's talk about relationship as you would define a normal relationship.
A relationship is a beautiful tool to explore your own self, to grow, and to transform yourself. It's like, the best simile I can think of is if you want to groom yourself, you need a mirror, and without a mirror you cannot groom yourself. Same way, if you want to groom your personality, the only way you can groom your personality is to have a person who can send you the reflection of yours, and then you can actually grow with the person. So a relationship is a beautiful tool to relive yourself, to see yourself from a different perspective, and to transform yourself into a better being.
Okay, so when we talk about abusive relationship, immediately we start thinking about maybe husband, wife, or boyfriend, girlfriend, etc. But before we get into that core issue, abusive relationship could be elsewhere also. It could be among friends. It could be at your workplace, where you feel that your potential is subjected to certain restrictions or certain comments which sort of prevents you from expressing the best that is there in you. So walk with me from the office space about what may be termed as abusive relationship.
It's a beautiful question that you have put, and I must say that unfortunately, whenever we talk about abusive relationship, and the moment the word abusive relationship comes, what comes in our mind is boyfriend, girlfriend, or husband, wife. But most of the abusive relationships are beyond husband wife or girlfriend boyfriend relationships. It's like we need to understand that the whole realm of relationships start with parents and kids, siblings, and then most of the time these days we spend in offices. So you have so beautifully put it that in offices, the worst that can happen to a person is a toxic colleague or a toxic boss, and that is the kind of abusive relationship which can take the wind out of your creativity and wind out of your happiness.
So now you have sort of described a state where many people feel they have certain agitation while going to workplace or certain type of anxiety, and that lingers while they come out also. So how to navigate it in such a way that it wouldn't be affecting you adversely?
As far as relationships are concerned, you can never be trapped in an abusive relationship if you know A, your worth, and B, you're full of self love. person who knows their worth and a person who is full of self love, they are very good at creating boundaries. Problem comes, most of the people who get trapped in abusive relationships are the people who do not know how to respect boundaries. And the first boundary they break is their own boundaries. So they never set boundaries for others. And why it happens? Because they want to enjoy that extra boundaryless relationship where they don't have to respect others' boundaries. Or sometimes because we want to feel secured, we allow others to trample upon our individual selves. And this is where the most of the times the beginning of an abusive relationship starts. You cannot make a very strong person fall into an abusive relationship. Let's take the example of an office space. So even in office space, your boss cannot trample upon your personality until you do not know how to define boundaries with your boss.
So let me ask you a question, which is general in terms of the response that I expect from you, and it would be applicable for all relationships, because what you have mentioned is it is inside out. So if you come across as someone who, without saying it, is in a position to draw the boundaries and sort of protect his space in a way which comes with a sense of self assuredness or having inner clarity or conviction about who you are, etc. So how to build that? If, let's say, if someone lacks it, then is there any method, any sort of modus operandi that uh, could be used to sort of overcome that sort of inner unease?
I could get your question right, then we're talking about how can how can one create self-love and how can one
Yes.
create
Yes.
an understanding of one's boundaries? Before answering this question, let me tell you something very interesting that I have come across while working with. I have worked with around 4,000 plus individuals across the globe, plus around 500,000 people across the globe in groups. Once someone falls in an abusive relationship, it's a vicious trap. The reverse psychology starts playing a game. It's like you're in an abusive relationship, you are being abused emotionally most of the times. Physically abusive relationships are very easy to get out of. Not that easy, but still easier to get out of. But when the relationship is abusive on the level of emotions, emotionally abusive relationships create a very vicious trap. And that is, you want validation from the same source where you are being, deprived basic human values. And why this happens? This happens because deep down, there is a tendency to seek validation uh, in everyone. Like we look for validation, and that validation makes our confidence go higher. The first thing that I think everyone among us needs to do since childhood, and I think parents and teachers can play a very big role over here, is to make two things clearer in a child's mind. The first is you are an individual with a very unique personality. Learn to love yourself as an individual with that personality. But at the same time, do not fall trapped by the individualistic approach that says that no, I cannot be flexible to others. You are individual, love your individuality, your uniqueness, but at the same time, create a flexibility which is ready to accept others as an individual. So if we can start training a child or an adult for the same, for the both, I think they will navigate relationships very beautifully. Problem is, most of the people are either at this extreme or that extreme. Either they fall for that individualism so much that they refuse to accept anyone who is not like that. They don't budge at all. Or they look for validation so much that they can start becoming a doormat for others.
So I think you have made a very good point. The balance is necessary. It is not advisable that you become a closed circuit that prevents you from growing as well as having a proper working relationship with others. Let me come towards the home front. And before getting to husband wife or boyfriend girlfriend relationship, let us look at some parents also come across as having certain tendencies which a child perceives as abusive in his subconscious, and when he grows or she grows, they feel that they were not treated in a fair manner, or they were not given their due space and their dignity was compromised. So at that time when they are a child, they don't process it that way, but as they grow, and then it causes a lot of psychological turmoil in the minds of such people. So would you term very dictatorial or authoritarian parents the way they want their kids to toe the line or follow their footsteps or directions, also coming under the category of abusive relationship?
For me, an abusive relationship must have an agenda that is not in the favor of the person. If you want to gain extra, if you want to have something that you want for yourself and you are depriving others of basic human values, only then I describe it as an abusive relationship. In case of parents, most of the times, until it is a physically abusive relationship, it is the interpretation of the event, the narration that goes on in the mind. And when I work with my clients, this is one of the very common things that they hold on to a lot of grudges against their parents. And it is very unhealthy to hold grudges against your parents, because no matter how bad a parent you had, what you must understand is that uh, most of the times parents have the intent of the parents, it cannot be questioned. The it is m- mostly the way they carry themselves that can be questioned. So now, if you ask me, I will only say one thing, that parent parenting is mostly not as per se abusive, but it is perceived, it can be perceived abusive. And parents need to have a very good dialogue with their children, especially once the child crosses age, say 10. Because by the time the age is 10, the child does not have that kind of sense, or, it doesn't feel offended. The child doesn't feel offended. But as they grow 11, 12, 13, the teens come, parents need to be very careful about how the child is perceiving what they are doing. But in most of the cases, I will always say the parenting can be a bad parenting, but in 90% of cases, it's not abusive. But yes, a child can term it as abusive.
Yeah, I
If
think what
you
you,
allow
yeah,
me,
sorry to interrupt. I think what you are saying probably holds true for most of the cases. There could be some exceptions where the child was beaten and they carried those kind of memories and they feel that they were not appreciated enough, etc. But let's move to the key relationship, which also relates to the day that is now observed as Valentine's Day, etc. So sometimes relationship takes an ugly turn without knowing. Those who were very much in love, they kind of fall apart and act in a way which may be destructive for the other partner, boy, girl, husband, wife, either way. What do you think typically is the common cause which results into a normal relationship turning to this sort of relationship of unpleasant series of experience?
First of all, we need to understand that a troubled relationship is not an abusive relationship. Unfortunately, these days, Instagram is full of some buzzwords. One of them is narcissist. So the easiest thing to do is to declare a person narcissist. Anybody who is not buzzing, anybody who is asking for what they want, and anybody who you are having a confrontation with, the easiest thing to do is tag them.
Label,
They are narcissists,
label, yeah.
sadistic, narcissists, etc., etc., etc. We have to be very clear about the concept of abusive relationship. A relationship getting sour, a troubled relationship is not an abusive relationship. A relationship where you have difference of opinion is not an abusive relationship. A relationship where people which is falling apart, most of the times it's not an abusive relationship. It's a relationship full of troubles. Why? So answering the first part, why most of the troubles happen in a relationship? Most of the troubles happen in a relationship because the the two things we spoke about. People are on one spectrum, and that is my life, my rules. Unfortunately, this cannot go on with a relationship. If you are in a relationship, it cannot be my life, my rules. A relationship has to be our life together because it's entangled now. So it has to be our rules. You have to create a win-win situation. And when people are not able to create win-win situations, that is when the whole trouble starts. So a troubled relationship is not an abusive relationship. Then what is an abusive relationship? An abusive relationship is when a person is constantly gaslighting you. A person is never ever considering any emotion of yours. A person is never ever considering your opinion about your own life. When the person doesn't allow you to function the way you want to function, even for yourself at all, then it is in the category of abusive relationship. Now, what is happening? Suppose one of the partners want to go to party and the another partner is saying that you cannot go to party. It might be a difference of opinion. But if two people are there in a relationship and they are just voicing an opinion, not forcing their opinion, it cannot be an abusive relationship. So we have to be very careful. A, are you always being told that you are 100% wrong all the time? But the word here is 100% wrong all the time. B, are you not being allowed to live your own life the way you want to live your own life? You're not allowed to watch a movie, you're not allowed to read a book, and you're being criticized for your own choices. And C, there is no collective decision there's no collective choices in the house. Your choices are always looked down upon. You are always told that your choices are not good, you're not good enough. Then you are in an abusive relationship.
So I think you have defined it very well, and many of our viewers would be clear that what unconsciously sometimes they term as abusive relationship is actually not abusive relationship. Having a little bit of trouble is a different thing. But now let's talk about navigating abusive relationship, and Of course, we are not talking about the domestic violence directly, but more on the emotional periphery, that if one is facing such a situation, then how to navigate it. And allow me also to briefly look at it from the gender perspective also. Generally, the cases that you have come across, is it only the man who is the one who is, let us say, is the abuser, or it is the female also? uh, Generally, if you uh, talk about that.
Slightly more men in Asia, because we live in a patriarchal relationship, patriarchal society, so men you sometimes have a little more edge. But I'll say it's just 60-40, not much to choose from. It's more about as far as physically abusive relationships are concerned, of course, more men, like 90%, 10%. But when it comes to abusive relationships, in case of emotions, it's pretty even.
So, if a couple is counseling, and the one who is abuser, whether wife or husband, are they also receptive? Do they realize what they are doing to their partner, or they are totally close even to consider that?
It's a beautiful question. Uh, I think in any of the cases, the person who is offending never feels that the person is doing something wrong. On the contrary, I've always seen that the offenders often ask, "What is my fault?" They feel so entitled. I know, and I come across so many people who have been doing thousands of wrong, and they often ask only one question: "What is my fault?" So, in psychology, we call it self-preservation. So, the art of self-preservation is so beautiful that your mind finds a logical answer for every wrong that you do. And
You'll justify it in
mostly,
your own way.
yeah, you justify it. And mostly those who are the most partial towards themselves always feel that they are very impartial.
So human mind is a very complex space, and
Absolutely.
yeah. But let's look at the one who is at the receiving end. How he or she should navigate this sort of a relationship, and is ending the relationship the only way, or when one should decide that this is enough and it's not going to help me lead the kind of life which I deserve.
The first thing is the one has to be very clear that yes, right now, my self-esteem is getting hurt, my confidence is getting crushed. So, in a relationship, if your confidence is getting crushed, in a relationship, if you always feel unheard, in a relationship, if you always feel you're not getting anything in return, you're not getting love, you're not getting respect. Love is very confusing. I think respect is very measurable. You're not getting respect, you're not getting validation. This is the time to call it out. So, the first thing is to call it out. Start speaking up for yourself. Start creating an environment where you can be heard. In most of the cases, if you start speaking up, it starts creating a difference. And the person starts, the funniest thing is people may argue with you, they may not agree with you, but the points gets registered somewhere in the mind. If you if you can put yourself logically. So if you ever feel that you are in an abusive relationship, the first thing is put your point very logically, very calmly, but start calling it out.
Yeah. Let
If
me ask
it
you this
doesn't
question.
work,
Sorry, I ask this question, putting myself in the shoes of someone. If he or she has to call it out or to articulate and express, they lack that sort of mental balance and poise where it would be conveyed properly. They would start either crying or shouting. So I heard two, three times you said calmly. So how to how to have that calmness? Any tips on that?
We need to understand then when we communicate, and emotion can become a powerful tool to communicate, and emotion can become a noise that can kill our message. If we start understanding, then at the moment it may be very difficult for us to articulate what we want to say, the person who is at the receiving end. But later on, you can articulate what you want to say. You can send a message, you can write a note, or you can calmly express this is what I wanted to say.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll, because we are about to conclude, I take a very different example, which is related to Ukraine and Russia. And I recently heard White House or I think President also mentioned that they want to bring both parties on the table. Now, in case of abusive relationship, the one who is victim, he may reach out to you, he may reach out to some people because he or she wants to take care of their inner sanctity. But if the other person is not coming on the table when the counseling is happening, will it still work or it won't work?
It always works because a relationship is never about one person, it's about the union. So if there is no conflict of interest, if both want to live happily, then
No, no.
if you
Sorry,
start
sorry.
putting,
Yeah, sorry. No, what I'm saying is a scenario where the abuser is not willing to
yeah,
listen. Yeah.
yeah, totally got your question, that I'm answering that only. So when if both people want to live happily, and the abuser, when the person who is at the receiving end comes to us, what we do, we boost the self-esteem of this person. We give the person clarity of what is happening. We give the person right words to speak. And when the person starts countering, in most of the cases, if the another person who is unknowingly abusing or as a habit abusing gets to know that now this is time to call it quits. And
Wonderful.
in most of the cases, relationships mend. In some relation time, then it's time to say bye bye.
Yeah. Actually, in a different context, time for us to say bye bye. But I think what we discussed may trigger certain ideas where someone may find a ray of light or overcome or be more aware about how. And I personally feel what you have suggested leads me to conclude that we need to be clear about ourselves and that
Absolutely.
inner work should be continuous process whereby we have our conviction, clarity, self assuredness, etc. And then rest would follow the way it should. So, on that note, thanking you with lots of good wishes, Nitinji.
Thank you.
Uh, we want this world to be the better place, so we need to have each home with sense of harmony and mutual respect, and of course, love. So, with love, I say goodbye. Namaste.